Okay, so I think cameras are rolling, which is great. And welcome everybody. Absolutely thrilled to have Alex Hutchison of the Data for Children Collaborative here to talk to us today. This is a project that I think Alex has been going for about 3 years now. It's a collaboration between UNICEF, the Scottish Government and University of Edinburgh. It's hosted under the auspices of the Edinburgh Futures Institute. It's something that we only became aware of fairly recently, actually, but we're immediately fascinated by the project because the whole area of data for good is clearly very closely aligned with the broader remit that we have of seeking to promote tech for good. And this is, one of the larger projects that's active in the data for good space. So really fascinated to have Alex join us today, and very much looking forward to sharing the information about the project with the group as a whole. We've got obviously a group in the room just now. We often also get a lot of people who want to watch the recording. So thanks for your willingness to have this recorded, because it means that we can share the information as widely as we possibly can. So with no further ado, if I can hand it over to Alex, take it away, please.
Great, thanks, Alistair, and thanks for Joanna for organising logistics. So I'm going to take you through some slides today to give you an overview of what the Data for Children Collaborative is all about, and I will leave some time at the end so we can have some questions and answers if anybody wants to find out more information. But as Alistair was saying in the introduction, Data for Children Collaborative has been around for in essence for 3 years, but more in practice for 2 years. We're a partnership between UNICEF, Scottish Government and the University of Edinburgh. And our mission is really to bring together the appropriate data and expertise to improve outcomes for every child. So we run a portfolio of projects that are data or data science oriented, and those are driven predominantly by UNICEF, but we do projects for other organizations as well, as long as the impact is going to be for good for children, then we will be interested in delivering. So our role, our function as organization is really to enable those collaborations and bringing together teams of academics, private sector and public sector to work on these really exciting challenge questions. So our kind of vision statement or a mission is we're dedicated to using data responsibly to improve outcomes for every child. And how we do that is bringing together expertise. So I'm going to talk to you in a little bit about our impact collaborations process and how we're bringing together different expertise. We work, as I was saying, with a range of partners, not just UNICEF, but we're really focused on getting the challenge question right. So working with those partners to make sure that we're posing a question in a way that is wide enough to have different people come in to address it, but narrow enough so that it's not just a blank sheet of paper and it goes a bit wild with trying to determine what the question is in the first place. There's quite a lot of activity that happens up front about making sure we're getting the question right. And all of our projects are child focused and have a link across back to the Sustainable Development Goals. And for our Scottish projects, we look at the National Performance Framework as well, and the link across to what Scotland's trying to achieve there. So what areas we work in, we've currently got what we class as 7 priority themes. So poverty, population, nutrition and mental health, COVID-19, climate change, and then we've got the really handy 7th category of ad hoc. And that's really where we can kind of slot in some projects that come our way that might not be within UNICEF strategic priorities per se, but they really align to our goals and our mission, particularly if they're very data focused, data science focused. So we've got 11 active projects at the moment. We've got 2 or 3 that have closed already. We're currently working in 8 countries across the globe. And we've got 4 projects that are kind of tackling global issues. And when I say 8 countries, we do have Scottish projects as well. We've got a couple of live projects, and I'll give you a bit of a case study example of one of those later on. So how we build our team, I've got a really handy little video, which I'm hoping Zoom will be kind enough to play and won't trip over, but I've got a YouTube link as well if that's easier. But let's try and watch the little video that explains how we pull together teams.
So we're not getting any sound on that, Alex.
Okay.
So I think when you're joining, when you're doing the screen share, there's a little checkbox that says also share sound, but you would have to stop the sharing and restart it probably if you wanted to do that.
Right, I can do that. So share screen, advanced.
Should be a checkbox about sharing sound.
Blah, 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 blah. Computer audio, stereo. That doesn't feel like it's going to do anything. Basic. Share sound, got it. Found it. Right. Apologies for that. I'll bring it right back because you do want to hear the sound on this one.
At the Data for Children Collaborative with UNICEF, we believe that making an impact is our collaborative effort. That's why we have launched a new initiative called Impact Collaborations. Our aim is to build a team of skills and expertise from a multitude of different sources, including public, private, and third sector, as well as academia, to help us with our vision on solving problems for children using data and data science. We develop challenge questions with our partners that tackle some of the key issues facing children today. We will then pose these challenges to our networks, but not on the solutions. Impact Collaborations will provide the platform and support required for teams to use their unique skills, expertise, and experience to design, shape, and develop projects to provide a solution to change in a new and innovative way. It couldn't be easier to get involved. We'll post challenge questions on our website and social media channels detailing the types of skills that we need. Then it's over to you. Simply tell us why you think that you could help through our expression of interest form. We will then bring together a select team to co-design a project that strives to answer the challenge question. This is a great opportunity to work in a dynamic team and to help us make positive impacts for children all across the globe. Can't wait to hear.
So that's my middle daughter recording in our downstairs cupboard of coats, and she had 2 takes, and every time it's now like 18 months old, and every time I hear it I'm constantly impressed by her skills at reading something just off of a screen and being able to get through that. So that's a
highly articulate child.
So to kind of summarize what we're saying there, I was talking before about how we have to really work very hard on building that question. We've got that wrong in the past, and we've learned our lesson on having too broad a question and then really not being able to build that team that can start to answer it. We post that out to our network, then a load of people will fill out quite a simple expression of interest form to say yes, how they would answer that question, but almost like what experience and skills they've got that might align to this. And the really key thing about our impact collaboration is we're trying to find people and engage people who aren't subject matter experts in the field of child poverty, that we're kind of wanting to draw in skills that haven't worked on children's issues before, because we think that's where we're going to get the innovative take on stuff. And so when we pull together those expression of interest forms, we're trying to look at this sort of cross section and what the different combinations could look like. So some of the people will be subject matter expertise on that area, but some might be like building a bridge and working out how much concrete should be needed through modeling. You know, it might just be completely left field. But for us, it's about how do we curate and convene those people. And importantly, we don't know what that project is going to look like at the beginning. It's all about doing a design thinking process, and we do a 3 or 4 workshop series events with those people to then develop what that project's going to look like. And there's nothing to say that anybody who's submitted an interest at the beginning and might come to workshops 1 and 2, they might then drop out the process and go, I'm probably not going to be able to engage at the level required, or my skills aren't quite the ones needed, but they get to kind of be part of the story at the beginning, which is a really nice way to then have that full engagement when the project starts. And so once we've developed what we think the project's going to look like and how much it's going to cost and how much time it's going to take, then we take that to my board to then get funded. So for our first 3 years of existence, we've had funding. So I've still got another year's worth of funding effectively to be able to fund these project ideas. And so that co-creation part's really important to then be able, for me to able to make recommendations to my board about funding it. And now we're looking for other funding sources and funding pots. But quite often we're taking these teams that we've built as a collaborative initiative, and now we're going on to the stage of doing a second project, a follow-on project, where we seek funding from elsewhere to keep that team together, which is kind of a really testament to how well these collaborations are going at the moment. So the other really important thing about, so there's the kind of building of the teams, but then there's also the how we work and how we facilitate those projects. So we've developed what we call a responsible innovation framework to make sure that all of our projects are trustworthy, transparent, and safe for every child, which are kind of our values. And there's I come from a banking background, so I consider it as a control framework. It's all about risk management. And so we make sure that we're prioritizing the right portfolio of projects. We've got all of the sort of data management, security, access control in place. Our governance board is there to make sure we're going in the right direction. But things like legal contracts and the fact that legal contracts really never touch the team they're delivering. Like, they don't get to see what somebody else signed them up to. So making that much more accessible. Safeguarding training, we're doing work for children, about children, on data for children. We need people to be aware of their responsibilities towards children. We have an impact statement at the end, because all of our work has got to have an impact in some way for children. And then I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail about our ethics and youth work. So our ethics assessment, and if you guys are working in the world of data at the moment, I feel that there's a lot of buzz about the words data ethics and not very much practice, and how do you operationalize that? So we've developed an ethics assessment that's really accessible for all these different parties that are coming to work with us, because again, we're not expecting everybody to be fully abreast of all the ethical challenge that our project might present. But how do we make it accessible so that they can answer questions from their part within the project and understand their responsibilities? So it's about adding value to the project rather than just having a tick box of, yes, we've done an ethical assessment, can we move on to the next stage? It's how are we able to improve this project and the way we're working on this project to make sure that we're mitigating the ethical risks that might be associated. And youth participation, at the beginning of our setup, a lot of people said, oh, how are you engaging youth? What are you doing to engage youth? And again, it could be what I could see would be quite tick box of, yes, we've had a conversation with young people. So we were quite resistant at the beginning because we just weren't sure why we were doing it. And so we had conversations with people about why we were doing it. And then we realized that actually there's a whole, every project should be ascertaining why it's important to get contributions from youth. So we look at, do we need your contribution from a context point of view or a design point of view? And that then leads us to, right, and this is then going to be the best way to engage young people. Is it focus groups? Is it surveys? Is it having them on a working group every week? But without the why, we couldn't really track to how to then engage people. So I've got two little case studies of some of the projects that we're working on at the moment. So one on climate change, which is one of our global projects, and one on poverty in Scotland, because I thought that might be of more interest to you guys. So our recent climate change project, again, really collaborative effort, multidisciplinary effort across a number of academic institutions in this case, less private sector and public sector involved in this one, but it's multidisciplinary in terms of it being climate science, social science, and socioeconomic science. So we've been building a children's risk index and identifying that children are more vulnerable to climate environmental shocks than adults. And so we've brought these multidisciplinary teams together to look at both the climate hazards and stresses, but with the children's vulnerability in terms of health, education, what's their current status in the countries that they live in, and then also thinking about sort of government adaptive capacity and sensitivities, and being able to build a global index that ranks countries about how susceptible their children are to the impacts of climate change. And so we've done that for UNICEF to look at the 2020 figures. We're now building out a forecast model for 2050. And the impact of that has been all pre-COP work, so that we're able to help UNICEF advocate for countries redesigning their programming around children because of their susceptibility to the impact of climate change. So a lot of different data and data statistical techniques coming together to build that index, but as well as the social science. So how are we thinking about children in a different light here, and a bit of literature review work around that as well. So the other project I wanted to talk to you about was we've been doing a project on understanding poverty and attainment at school catchment disaggregation across the Northern Alliance region in Scotland. So Northern Alliance is a regional improvement collaborative that kind of goes from Aberdeen City, Highlands and Islands, Orkney, Shetland, down the west coast, all the way down to Ayrshire. So these are much more rural and dispersed populations in these catchment areas. And they are really struggling with the current methodology of using Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation to determine socioeconomic information about their catchments. And so we're trying to help them look at what other data might inform them on understanding attainment figures in those areas. So this has been delivered with an academic institution from Strathclyde, private sector firm from India in Delhi, and a private sector firm in Fife. So you can kind of see the diversity of contribution there. So the need for this project came from the Northern Alliance needing to understand more about their rural areas, and they just don't have very good information about their pupils. And we feel that if their teachers and head teachers and practitioners, quality improvement officers were given the right information in the right way, they would be better placed to support their children. And so our key findings from this so far, we're just looking at phase 2 of this project. So again, trying to keep that collaborative team together and build off onto another project. So we know from this study that factors impacting rural students are different from urban students. So cost of living, culture and aspirations, digital infrastructure, distance to school, distance services, these are critical factors. Minority ethnic groups, seasonality of work. A load of, we've also had a big statistical study pulling together free school meals with pupil census information, and able to identify that rural and small town schools do have a lower level of educational mobility. So they are impacted in a worse way. And it's really now about how do we, why is that the case? How do we unpick that further? So we can see there's a correlation, but how do we now unpick that further? What we've also found from talking to people in those workshops that we've done on this one is that the practitioners find information very difficult. They're thrown at data at them left, right, and center. It's very traditional. I'm sure you guys have been involved in a number of cases where you're trying to help people get insight from the data and try and grapple with volumes and volumes of data. So we want to look at how can we help teachers and practitioners with their management information systems. How can we simplify it and draw out the right information? And then also a really interesting finding from this has been about the definition of attainment itself and positive outcomes, and how those are maybe a little bit restrictive for rural communities on the traditional, yes, a child has left school and not gone to university. Well, wouldn't that be okay if they were then going on to continue farming for their family or similar? So yeah, loads of good work to come and spring off that. But for me, what's interesting about that one is that academic private sector combination of skills coming together. So I'm kind of keen to get conversations going with you guys to hear more from you, but the key messages from me around this are that, and I think you guys probably know this already, given that you're part of the tech army, your skills are not limited to your current sector or field of work. They have value elsewhere. Working with expertise from different backgrounds will make for new growth and development, both individually and for your organization. And we've seen that in leaps and bounds. So we've seen a lot of kind of students working with us on various projects and how much they've grown as individuals through working with other private sector collaborators and seeing them then spring into jobs from that. Working on data for good projects can increase ethical literacy that can be taken back to the workplace. So as I said, our ethics assessment that we've built is all about almost like increasing people's knowledge and understanding of the field of ethics. So a lot of people get confused between ethics and data protection and regulation and law. But ethics, when we talk about ethics, we're talking about socioethics and what are the impacts on humans. And I think, again, coming from a banking background, that there's so much that could be relearned back into organizations about data ethics and what's the impact of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis with algorithms, machine learning, or with any of our activities in the workplace. Are we thinking about the human factors of what we're doing? And ultimately, we all want to make a positive impact on society. And I know from, again, coming from a banking background, I was desperate to get out of there to make a positive impact on society. But I now realize that there are other ways to do that, to be, get involved in different projects in different ways while you're still doing your job. And I think that's like a really valuable learning for me. And when people come and talk to me about that, I'm always trying to encourage all the different ways that people can get involved in doing good. So really that was a little tour, summary tour of what we're doing. And hopefully it gives you a little taster of the type of work that we do in the Data for Children Collaborative. And I guess from my point of view, the aim of today and the engagement on today is about making sure that you know that these challenge questions are out there and will be paged, and that we have both individuals and organizations coming and getting in touch with us to be part of those collaborative teams. And so we're always looking to kind of broaden and expand that network of who sees those impact collaborations opportunities as we post them on our LinkedIn and Twitter and social media and all that sort of thing. So we're always trying to make sure we're casting the net as wide as possible, because we think the more diversity we can have in bringing skills, the better. So any questions from anybody?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Alex. That's really fascinating. People on the call won't be surprised to hear that I'm terrifically excited by this. I think the work you've been doing is really insightful and powerful, and I see lots of ways that we could potentially put together collaborations. I mean, just even on the call here, I see Abasa is here, who's been doing some analysis on work around computer science education in schools, which is a big topic that is receiving a lot of attention at the moment, particularly with some recent announcements from Scottish Government. I see we have Ila Albarezi with us, who's from JP Morgan in their Tech for Social Good organization, with whom we have great links. And I dare say there may be opportunities there. We also, unfortunately, one of our colleagues, Kirsty, is not on this specific call, but she's been involved along with Joanna on a project with University of Glasgow, some PhD students doing some analysis of data around the promise, which I dare say has probably come up in your survey of what's been going on. And we're about to embark on a project, I think I mentioned before, which is looking to address some of the challenges that young people with care experience have got around acquiring digital skills and confidence. So there's just so much stuff there. So I'm really excited, but I'm going to keep quiet now because there's lots of people on the call. Really great to get any comments, any questions from people for Alex after such a fascinating presentation.
I think it sounds fascinating. It's wonderful. And the whole ethics thing really grabbed my attention. And I wondered, could you provide, or do you have resources you can point us at that would just generally educate the whole of the STA on the ethics of projects we might be doing and just make us think about it in a completely different way? Because I have a feeling there's probably like a missed opportunity, a missed understanding on our part.
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a lot of collateral around ethics, and I'm going to share a link specifically to our webpage, which will kind of give you all of the information. But recently, our advocacy and relations manager did a really nice, we've started a dictionary, and she just did a nice thought piece on what do we mean when we talk about ethics, which is a really nice kind of introduction. When we built this ethics assessment, we love a metaphor in the Data for Children Collaborative. And so the whole assessment that we've built is really, it's all about like being qualified to drive a car, basically. So we have got a compass, which is like our guiding position on, and it gives us that with every child, with trust, with transparency, and with safe data. So the compass is all about our guiding direction. But then we have a roadmap where we're basically going through a journey, and we think about the project as the journey. What do we need to know before we start the journey? What do we need to assess while we're en route? And what do we need to assess at the end of the journey? And then supporting that roadmap, which is effectively your assessment questions, we've got a highway code. So that is the thing that basically, if you want to read all the background of GDPR, here's the link, here's this, here's all the information, but also it gives you the examples of the way you should be thinking about those questions. So when it's says something as simple as who are your stakeholders, rather than you saying, well, it's UNICEF and then it's Jamaican adolescents aged 15 to 24, it's the highway code then brings you into thinking, but also we're talking about the Ministry of Health, and we're talking about counsellors, and we're talking, so it really, and it's the family, and it's the stigma attached to that family. So it really starts to bring you out of that. I'm a delivery person in a project, and I think I know as much as I need to know. This ethics assessment is about like lifting you and having that reflection piece with that supplementary information. We've always thought about having like a little driving license on the edge of it, but we've never quite got that far. But we want to continue the metaphor, and we've developed ethics frameworks for other people as well. We developed help the Scottish Government do the COVID-19 data intelligence network. So how are they using data to respond to COVID, and we helped them develop their ethics framework. And we couldn't think of a better analogy than the driving metaphor of, are you ready to hit the road? You've got everything you need to hit the road. But we did help them develop this sort of values and principles piece, which has to come up front when you're thinking about ethics and making that ethics specific to your organization, how you operate as an organization. Anyway, long story short, those links give you the compass, the roadmap, the highway code. All of it is open. We want people to be using it. So we would be delighted if people do start using it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Joanna.
Alex, typically how big are your teams when you're kind of working on each of these?
Yeah, so They kind of vary in size. We've got a few more Earth observation geospatial things, which have got teams of around 6. So that's taking account of the UNICEF subject matter expert, the principal investigator, the researcher, and other interested parties. So around 6 on that. Whereas, I mean, yesterday I ran a mental health workshop about for Jamaican adolescents, bringing together, we're kind of augmenting to the existing team. The existing team has about 8 people on it, and like yesterday was 16. And I think we'll get to a point where we've got about 12 on that. We, again, analogy, we talk about partnerships and collaboration. There's like a happy middle ground. So quite often when you're looking for funding on these research bids, the more big names you can get involved, the better. So if you can get SCDO and UNICEF and an institute from the global south, that's going to strengthen your bid, which is great. But then the way we describe it is we're not building a cruise ship. Like, it's not all about all the I've got this and that and how amazing it is I've got all these partners, because you can't manage that. That's not operationally viable. So we try and be the kind of the smaller boat that can drag the cruise ship around and make sure it is more operationally sustainable and you can get people talking in the right way. Our climate change project's probably got, I mean, it's got 5 institutions on it. So our team meetings, our weekly team meetings are big on that one, and difficult to manage because the more people it is, the more voices, the more you need to make sure everybody's listened to. So yeah, but they tend to range between 3 and 4 partner organizations, and then 2 or 3 people from each of those.
I must mention as well, we've got Jacqueline on the call, who's been doing a lot of good work with Winning Scotland and really trying to harness some of their data. Jacqueline, I'm not sure, does any of that data overlap with the final case study that Alex was talking through? If she's there.
Yeah, let me have to step away. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Do you have any other questions or input from anybody?
I had a quick question. So I think one of the trickiest aspects of dealing with data is, of course, the whole aspect of confidentiality and the personal information, etc. So I'm wondering, because of course you have volunteers working on this, do they get full access to the data? Like, how does it work from a practical legal perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. So these aren't always volunteers. So we do fund private sector and public sector people that come and work with us, but we do often get some people coming in pro bono as well. But we still put in place legal contracts around everything that we're delivering. So we have legal collaboration agreements that we draw up from our side and sometimes from the UNICEF side to determine what the responsibilities are. And I mentioned in the responsible innovation framework that legals at a glance piece. So that most of our stuff that we've developed has come about because something's gone wrong, or we've had an experience where we thought that can't be the best way to do that. And our legals at a glance was really as a result of the fact that some of us in our team find it really difficult to read long documents and legalese. And we were like, how on earth is a data scientist who signed up to do 1 day a week from Nationwide, who's doing unstructured data analysis for us for our HIV project, how are they supposed to know what their responsibilities are on looking at HIV household survey data? They're not going to read that massive contract that everybody that their boss signed, that they're then acting on behalf of their boss. So we have we've developed this legal at a glance that just gives like a 1-pager document of saying, what are you, the person who's working on the data at the end, responsible for, to really simplify that data. We have got a lot of infrastructure available to us because of our partners. So sometimes we work on UNICEF infrastructure and have security around that. Sometimes we're working on the academic institutions infrastructure. So they take a bit more responsibility over security and confidentiality. But ultimately, we've got the very strong collaboration agreements between the organizations, and then the second layer of actually making that meaningful to the people who are working on the data on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you so much.
I just noticed in the chat that Jacqueline's saying she's having technology issues with her headset and Zoom, but she's saying that she actually thinks that organisations like Winning Scotland would greatly benefit from the type of data sets that you're talking about, and they will have similar issues with assessing the impact of rural location projects as compared to the big cities. So it may well be that there's some opportunity to share some experience on that as well.
And you mentioned the project and Kirsty. I don't know if that is the promise. Sorry, I don't know if that is Kirsty who works on our team for Fraser Valander Institute. We do have.
No, it's Kirsty McIntosh who's our head of partnerships. So we've done a bit of work with University of Glasgow and some of their PhD students who did some projects with us. One of which was in looking at the data around the promise. And that's obviously an area of interest in relation to this project I'm talking about. So no, not Kirsty that's on your team, but we should took Kirsty's up or something like that.
But yeah, we are working with the Promise on developing a data map of Scotland. So we did this through the impact collaborations process so we've got the Fraser Valander Institute with one researcher called Kirsty on that team. We've got a private sector firm from Aberdeen, and we've got an academic from the University of Indiana who's contributing pro bono. And we've got South Ayrshire local authority who went through the impact collaboration process as well. So they put in an expression of interest form. They weren't saying we can help build a data visualization or data map of the data in Scotland that relates directly and indirectly to children and families, but they were saying we're interested and we know stuff. So the way that we crafted that project was to ultimately design it around South Ayrshire wanting to be involved and be a case study. And so what we've been doing is interviews with South Ayrshire as a first case of how do you find out what data is collected about children and families in Scotland. And then that's helping us then to build a tool. And we're now at the stage of building a platform to gather the information that then people will be able to search and query on data, how it's stored, who's collecting, how regularly it's collected, what's the level of usage, what unique identifiers, is it CHI, is it candidate, the Scotch candidate number. And that ultimately will give the Promise a stronger base of evidence, as well as a lot of access for everybody across Scotland to understand that landscape, but a stronger base of evidence to say, and this is why we need to improve this data landscape in Scotland. So yeah, so it's a great project. We're really enjoying working with the teams on that.
So it sounds like you're doing a phenomenal amount of amazing things with very different data sets. How do we find out what you're working on to see if there is synergies with some of the?
So again, our website has all of our themes, which then have all of our projects under each theme. So under poverty, we've got about 4. Under COVID, we've got 2. Climate change and mental health are newer, so we've only got 1. So those projects are listed on there. And what we also have is a knowledge zone, which is where we kind of try and funnel our outputs. So where we think we've learned something useful, we categorize it under one of our 3 theory of change outcomes that we're looking for: so actionable insights, responsible innovation, and knowledge exchange. And we categorize things. So yes, there's papers and publications, but sometimes there's data catalogs, or there's stakeholder lists of who's interested in the impact of COVID on children in Scotland. So that's all on our knowledge zone. and definitely worth clicking around to see if there's anything of use on there.
Brilliant, thank you. I like that.
Yeah, it's great. And I think, again, just coming back to this project that we're going to be involved in, it's about to kick off. How great would it be to build in measurement from the start rather than having to reverse engineer it at the end? So I think it'd be fascinating to get some insights from your team in terms of how do we go about designing the ways that we can capture data as we go along. There are a number of partners involved in that collaboration. So it's being led by YMCA in Scotland, but also involves Barnardo's, YouthLink, and Renfrewshire Council in this case. So again, there's lots of collaboration opportunities there.
Excellent. Definitely happy to follow up with conversations about that.
Great stuff. Any more questions from anybody in the room? Okay, looks like not, but I no doubt whatsoever that you've got cogs spinning in everybody's heads about the potential implications of some of this. So thank you very much indeed, Alex, for joining us today.
I see another question from Jacqueline just come in. So will the data be available open source? So if that's a question about the promise specifically, yes, but we're not collecting data, we're collecting data about the data. So that's an important factor to think about with the promise. It's how are we're effectively mapping the metadata, although that's a dangerous word to use because everybody gets tripped over definitions, but we're effectively, that will be absolutely open source and we want people to be using that output. In terms of other data, so it's all depends on what we're working on. Our policy is making everything open, transparent, and getting it out there. But obviously in some cases we're working on really sensitive data, and then it's just about can we get the insights and results of what we've been learning out there, and so we have to take the most appropriate measures on that.
Absolutely understood. Thank you. Okay, great stuff. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Alex. As I say, lots of food for thought for all of us. Really appreciate your time, and we will certainly look to follow up and see where we might be able to work together and potentially bring in some of the partner organizations that we're working with. As I say, we've got Ila from JP Morgan, but there's a number of other organizations that we work with who I'm sure will be fascinated to look at some of the projects you've got coming up and potentially playing their part in it. So thank you very much indeed, and thanks everybody for joining us.
Great stuff.
Thank you very much, Alex. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.